Welcome to Defying Finance, where we talk about your money and your financial decisions. Today, I want to go over a question that I think is very important. This will stand the test of time. Right now, we're at the end of 2022. The housing bubble's blowing up. The air is going to be coming out. But that doesn't really matter, even if you're watching this in the future, because the math is the same. And the question is, should you rent or should you buy? Right? So we're going to go over that in this video because there is a common misconception or a saying that's been around for a very long time, and it goes like this. If you rent, you're throwing your money away, which that isn't necessarily true, right? That's just a blanket statement because you're about to find out there's plenty of places in the United States and around the world in general that it's actually cheaper to rent than to buy. And in fact, it may even be safer to rent than to buy. If you ever heard the saying, you don't want to catch a falling knife, right? What if you're in an imploding housing market? Perfect example. So let's break this down. And I think this will hopefully debunk this idea or this common saying that you hear from realtors or your parents or something like that. And really just use the math to make your decisions. Now, I'm talking about the financial decisions. There may be personal decisions you make based on, hey, I want to live in the country or raise my kids X way. That's totally fine. This is pure financial decision making. So let's head over the internet. We'll check out some different properties. We'll run some numbers on them, and maybe we'll come up with a better understanding on why it may be better to rent than to buy, or maybe it is better to buy than to rent for you, depending on where you're located and what your situation is. So the first thing we need to understand that most of you know, right? It seems common sense. When you rent a apartment or a home, let's say it's $2,000 a month, you're throwing away that money in the sense that, you don't own the home, you never get to pay it off or whatever that is, right? So that makes sense. That $2,000 comes into your pocket and now it's gone because you have to live, right? But what most people forget, or I mean, I'm shocked that I hear realtors say this all the time, that, it's better to rent or better to buy than to rent. It's, you have interest, taxes, and insurance on a home, right? It's called principal, interest, taxes, insurance. The only part that's going to pay down your home, that loan that you have, it's the principal. The taxes, the interest, the insurance, maybe even HOA fees, depending on where you live, or Mello-Roos taxes, or building a school, maybe it's a brand new home and you have to pay that for 5 or 10 years or something. That money is being thrown away just like rent. So you have to take that into consideration. The only part you're keeping might be $500 a month for your home. It's paying down that actual principal balance on the loan because initially you're paying more the interest up front, right? That's what most people seem to leave out here. And you're going to find out you might have that apartment you're renting for $2,000 a month, or you could go buy a home, and we want to make it equivalent. Let's say you're renting a 3-bedroom apartment. Let's go find a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home that's similar in square footage, and let's see, what would your payment be? What are the requirements? And when you do the math, you might find out that it's $3,200 a month for that same equivalent square footage, the size, everything. Maybe you get an upgrade because you get the garage, maybe a small backyard, maybe a big backyard. That's what we have to look into for your area, right? But you start to realize, wait a minute, I'm paying $1,200 more a month to own this home, but the principal maybe is going down $600, right? So really it's costing you $2,600 a month. You're throwing away owning that home. And I know someone's going to say, yeah, but you get the appreciation on the home. Maybe. But again, right now it's 2022. And is that the case? All right. So as we head over here to the internet, we're going to go ahead and take a look at some properties. So this is where I live, El Dorado Hills, California, at least at the time of this recording. It'd be nice to move here eventually to another state. We'll see. And again, that always comes down to your individual situation. But this, I know this area, so it helps me talk about it easier, right? Now, this is a pretty nice area of Northern California, about, maybe 2 hours from the Bay Area, about an hour from South Lake Tahoe. Great little area. Pretty expensive to live here relative to some of the other surrounding areas, but even Folsom, California, if you ever heard of the Folsom Prison Blues, right? That's Folsom, California, Folsom Lakes over there. But now in El Dorado Hills, there are a lot of wealthier people, business owners and stuff like that. So maybe somewhat affordable. Even Gavin Newsom lives right up the road from here. So, anyway. So if we look at El Dorado Hills, California, let's go find a home. Let's switch it to, well, we'll leave it on buy for now. Okay, so here's your Folsom Lake, like all of this area is fairly expensive. So say your kid goes to school somewhere around here or over here or whatever, right? Or even in Folsom, you have to actually move a decent distance away to start getting into some, I wanted to say somewhat reasonable prices, but they're not really somewhat reasonable priced right now at the end of 2022. They're going to get there. But if you look at the relative income, like for example, let's go to Roseville. I believe, I'll have to look it up again. I think I looked last year. I mean, look at these homes right here, right? 780,000. I think the average household income in Roseville is about 75,000. And that's household income, right? They're not buying that. You got to have a massive down payment to be able to do that if you were. But anyway, let's get back into this. Let's zoom into this area. So what do I have these prices at right now? No minimum, no max. Let's bring it down to, let's say 900,000. Get rid of some of these things. Okay, now this is dirt. This is land. So I'm going to get rid of those too, so that way it doesn't look like there is properties available where you're like, hey, there's a $300,000 property. What are you talking about? No, they don't exist. So anyway, let's zoom in. I clicked on this one already, looks like. So let's check that out. What do we got? Come on, open up. Okay, so what's the square footage of this? This is a 5-bed, 4-bath, 3,300 square feet. Looks like a 2-car garage. Let's go see the backyard. It has a small front yard, but it's there, right? Nice kitchen, but looks like it's probably going to be a small backyard. But fairly new, right? Not super old or anything like that, built in 2018. And we're going to go find something in the same neighborhood that's, somewhat similar, and maybe there's something for rent. So let's see. Sorry if you hear my mouse clicking. I have an extra mouse today. Wow, that is a pink room. This isn't my normal mouse. Anyway, you get the gist. So if we were to look at this, let's go ahead and click on this. We could use their calculator, I guess. But just taking a look at this just right off the bat, right? This estimate includes principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, okay? Now, interest rates at this time have climbed up quite a bit. And of course, this is going to vary depending on the interest rate in the future whenever you're watching this video. But first off, I want you to notice, look at the down payment here, right? 20% down. That's so, you don't have to pay the principal mortgage insurance and things like that after the 2008 crisis. It's just an extra payment you end up having to make, another $100, $200, $300 a month sometimes on top of your payment. But first off, looking at this, I want you to ask yourself, do you have that much money to put down to get outside of that? A lot of people don't. I mean, if you look at the savings rate in the United States, it's very low. Most people can't even do that. So what do you end up doing? It's, we could use an FHA loan, so we can do 3.5%. So let's start there. Update. Your payment jumps way up, right? So again, you're not looking at an $865,000 home for yourself, but we're going to compare this to the rent, right? So we want to get a somewhat realistic number. Now, if you were to buy this home, you still have to put down $30,000. So when you're renting this home, if you were to go just rent this, do you think they want $30,000 up front? Well, no, they want first and last month's rent or something like that, right? So there's that, but someone's going to make the argument, yes, but this $30,000 down payment, instead of $865, it's going to be $835 for your loan. So you're already pre-buying that down. That money's going to be there. Not necessarily. Again, right now, if you were to buy this home, you might find out that home prices here, for example, in the whole Sacramento area have already fallen. This is kind of crazy, like 10% in 3 months, which is completely unreal for a housing market, right? It's acting like a stock, but that's what's happening right now. People, mostly it has to do with the interest rates, but people can't afford that, right? So it's going to drive these prices down unless the Fed turns and lowers interest rates again and try to reinflate this bubble. But anyway, the point is this. A lot of people don't even have this, right? Or if you did have this money, you might be considering, well, do I want to rent though? Maybe I don't want to dump that $30,000 into this right now. Maybe the housing market looks like it's kind of going down, so I'm just going to sit on the sidelines. Well, you got to live somewhere, right? So let's look at this. $7,256 a month, right? Now this was 3,300 square feet. I'm going to leave this one open instead of closing that, just looking for another one. Let's go to rent and let's just look at that same area on the map. Is there anything else for rent? I think that other one was actually right around here, wasn't it? That's a really nice house. That's a much bigger house. That's less comparable. Look at that. That's actually really nice. Is that a pool? Oh my goodness, that has a huge yard. But anyway, that's a little less comparable to that other one. Less rooms, but a much bigger place. Hey, look at this one. This one's 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths, about 200 square foot smaller. Actually, we've seen this one. We actually drove by this house. They're still dropping the price on this. Oh my goodness. This was $4,000 a month about 30 days ago. And they dropped to 37. Now they're down to 35. That tells you they're having trouble renting this. So whoever owns this, if they have a loan on it, you just saw that loan amount, right? Look at this. It's basically the same house, right? Actually, I think this one has a bigger lot. But anyway, the point is this. It's a couple hundred square foot difference, right? Same neighborhood, right? We know that area. It's a really nice, great area. But look at the difference. $3,500 a month for basically the same home. Would you rather pay $3,500 a month, or would you rather pay, was it 72? Yeah, 72.56. You can live in that home and pay $3,500 a month and throw that away every month. Or you can move in that home for $7,200 a month, pay almost twice as much as it costs to rent, and throw away even more money, right? You're probably, my guess is it's probably 700 to 1,000 maybe going towards principal on that home, that if you were to buy it, right? So sure, you're paying down your home $12,000 a year if it's $1,000 a month going to that principal, right? But that still means you're throwing away $6,000 a month until you hope you could refinance someday at a lower interest rate. And even then, let's take a look at that. Let's go to this property. Let's say interest rates fall. And even if you get this place for 3.5% interest update, it's still $5,712 compared to $3,500 a month, right? I mean, think about that. It's way less to rent than it is to buy that home. So what I would do is I would say, well, clearly these home prices are overvalued, right? Yes, this one might be pending, but that doesn't mean anything. It's been on the market for 83 days. Remember how hot the market was, right? And there's an HOA fee here. This isn't going away. So when you look at it that way, you start to get a realistic idea on your area, and is it better to rent or to buy at that particular time. And real estate is generally a slow moving market. So you it doesn't crash super fast, and generally it doesn't go up super fast, except, like what happened in COVID. They printed all this money, they're playing with interest rates, and you create bubbles and they bust too. So when you're looking at something like this, you just want to compare in your market. Hey, I'm looking to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, or I'm looking to rent a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. Go look and see for basically this a similar area, square footage, maybe the size of the yard, everything you can find as close as possible. Just like when you're buying that home, they're looking for comparables, right? Do the same thing with a property for rent. Go find a couple of them and ask yourself, well, do I want to pay this much for the mortgage? And it may be way higher, or do I just want to rent for now? And if you make the typical income in your area, you might realize, like, let's say it's $50,000 a year for a household income where you live, and your payment is, I don't know, $3,000 a month, right? $2,500 a month. You have to ask yourself, well, could I afford that reasonably if I didn't have a car payment or something like that? And then start thinking about all the other people around you, all your neighbors. Are they in a similar situation? And if they are, then, and it's unaffordable to you, it's unaffordable to them too, right? So when you start to think about it that way, you can already forecast and look into that market and say, hey, this is unsustainable. It has to come down. I'm going to go ahead and sit on the sidelines and rent for now. If it's really close, right, where maybe it's $2,500 to rent, maybe it's $2,500 to buy, well, then you can buy. Or maybe the market had just crashed and you live in a cyclical market, like in California. We have these big ups and downs, right? Maybe the market had just crashed and it's still a little bit more to buy that house, but you know that you can most likely capture some of that appreciation at that point. Well, you might as well buy then. But you just don't want to get stuck in the mindset that, oh, it's going to keep going up. It's going to keep going up. Maybe over the very, very long term. But the question is, are you 20 years old? Are you 30? Are you 50 years old watching this video, right? When you're 80, is it going to make that much of a difference? Maybe you don't even live that long, right? Maybe if you're young enough, sure, you can buy the home and sit there. But who does that in their normal life when you're just shopping for something, right? You always want the best deal you can get, right? So this goes to like investors too. I had a friend, I was telling him, hey, you should sell your house. The market's just crazy high. You could just go rent for way cheaper in the area. He'd have made like $150,000 on his house, right? And this was before rents really started to climb dramatically. And still, you could see in the area, it's way, way cheaper to rent. So he didn't want to do that. Well, the idea was, even if he was to look at how much he's throwing away with rent, he could have actually took that cash, rented a place for 10 years, and just lived off the profit. Just that. He would have thrown all that money away, but it would have took 10 years for it to happen. So the point is, he could have took that cash, went and rented somewhere for a couple of years, let this market start to dive right now like it is, and now he has more buying power as those prices come down. You get more home for your money. That's what you do when you're shopping at the grocery store, I hope. Or you're trying to buy clothes, you're trying to get the best deal you can. Apply the same principle to buying a home. But let's go back and check out some of the stuff online here. Let's go ahead and run some numbers on this site here so you get a better idea. So let's say that was $865, I think it was. We'll use that. We want 0 down payment just to keep it easy. I know they showed it on there, but I really want to make this comparable to a rental. So that was about, let's call it 6.5% right now at least. And we won't even put PMI in there. Property tax in this area is 1%. I know, surprising for California, right? We'll just leave the homeowner's insurance at that. First payment due, blah, blah, blah. Make sure I got a real number here. Okay, great. So here's your principal and interest alone, right? Now that's not just principal. Most that you're going to find out is interest. Your property tax, you're paying $720 a month. Is your home insurance. So if we go down here, your first payment that you make, only $781 is going to principal. Now you see it's going up every time you make a payment. It creeps up a little bit. But remember, this is a 30-year mortgage. So you can see at this graph, it takes a long time to pay down most of that interest before you start to pay off more principal, right? This is 2040. Right? 2042, that's 20 years from now. So when you look at it that way, no, for a long time, you are throwing away this $4,685. You're throwing away this right here. Well, that's, I guess, your taxes, insurance, PMI, that's everything. Now, this doesn't include the HOA fees in there either. But if you add these two together, you are throwing that all away. This is the only amount, the $781. Let me see if I could zoom in on that for you. But that's the only amount right here that you can claim you're putting away in a bank account, right? You look at your home as a savings account. That's the only amount you can say, oh yeah, but I'm saving $781 a month technically in a savings account. Well, my argument would be, why not just rent that other home, right, for $3,500 a month? Where'd that one go? Why not rent this other home and just put $700, $800 a month away in a savings account, right? Why not just do that? And it would still be cheaper. You see? This is just simple mathematics, but most people overlook this based on a simple statement that's gone on for years and years and years, that you throw away money if you rent. Clearly, in this situation, you can see you're throwing away way more money by buying a house. And in this particular market we're in right now in 2022, you're also taking the downside risk of the falling prices on top of that, where you end up upside down. Or let's say you put $100,000 down on this particular house, right? Well, let's say that home price falls $200,000. Now you're upside down on your mortgage, right? And not only that, you can't get that $100,000 back out. So that money's gone. If you sold your house, obviously it's still technically there if you held on to it for 30 years, but that $100,000 would die with inflation. You see what I mean? So when you look at it that way, it is much cheaper to rent in that market right there. So you need to do this with your market back where you live. Start comparing those homes and see, is it cheaper to rent than to buy? It may be. So another thing, if we were to take this $865,000 home, right? What price would that home have to come down to be very close to the same price as renting, right? If interest rates were to stay the same and drive that market price down, because obviously people in that market are going to say, I'm going to go rent because it's way more affordable. And they may be forced in that situation to do that. They may not have a choice, right? They might not be able to pay $7,200 a month. So they say, oh, well, honey, let's just go rent this place at $3,500. It's just as nice. It's the same size. Let's just do that. And it's the same area. Our kids get to stay in the same school system, right? What do you think they're going to do? They're going to soak up all those homes. They may even start bidding up the rent on those homes, right? Maybe someone comes along and says, hey, I'll pay $3,700. I can afford that, right? I'll pay $4,000. I can afford that, but I'm not paying $7,200 a month to buy a home. That's what you're going to see in this type of situation, right? But let me switch screens here. Look at this. This home, let's put this at 500. I have the mortgage amount there, but let's refresh it. So at 6.5%, property tax 1%, the same yearly home insurance. We're not putting HOAs in there. But just to get a number, what would the value of this home have to come down to in order to be somewhat reasonable compared to the rent in that area? Well, look at our total monthly payment, $3,685. Technically, it'd have to come under $500,000. So in order to be competitive with this property that's for rent, that home right here, would have to fall all the way down to less than $500,000. Think about that. That's a significant drop. But that is realistic for that market. Now, it's only one of the two. Rent has to go up or home prices have to come down. And eventually they find that equilibrium until the Federal Reserve drops interest rates through the floor. And now all of a sudden it's, oh, I could pay more for that house now. And their mortgage stays the same, right? Or the mortgage comes in less if they were to refinance. So now it's cheaper to buy than to rent payment wise. Most people buy, think about your car, right? When you're buying a car, now I don't recommend you buy a car this way. I always go for the price first before I negotiate any payments at all. But one of the first things they always ask you is, well, what do you want your payment to be, right? Because that's how you buy your house too. You're looking at your house as a monthly payment. What might be coming in the future, I think, is a 40-year or a 50-year mortgage, which would mean it would spread out your payment over a longer period of time, which would drive that price down. But if you did the math with that, you find out real quick, interest rates are far more effective on that than extending the time period for that loan. If you added 20 years to your mortgage, for example, you might find out the payment only drops a couple $100 a month, right? On a very expensive home like this $800,000 home, I bet you it only drops like $300 a month. But if you were to change the interest rate 1 or 2%, that alone would change the payment dramatically, right? So the interest rates are very, very powerful. But think about how far this has to come down to meet that equilibrium to become affordable again for people in your area. That's what you're looking for. So if we were to recap some of this, the saying that you throw away money when you rent, it depends on your market, the time you're in, at the time you're looking. There's a lot of variables to it. You can't just throw that out there and say that, because clearly, as an example we just looked at, that is not true. We could pull up another property and do the same thing. Do the same thing with your area. Look at your finances and say, hey, is it cheaper month to month to rent than to buy? And then look at your market and say, well, is the market, how fast have those home prices climbed over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right, to get to wherever you are today at the time you're planning on buying when you're watching this video? And then do that math and say, hey, is that growth realistic? Did it increase 5% a year, 10%, or like what happened in COVID, 25% a year? A lot of that just has to do with interest rates, and a bunch of money was printed. That's it, right? That's what drove those prices. And whenever you get near the top, everybody's always saying, oh, the market's incredible, this is amazing, you don't want to miss out on buying a home and getting all that appreciation. I can tell you right now, in 2022, many people who just bought near the end of the year, they're already feeling that loss. If you bought in Sacramento area in the last 3 months, you've already lost 10% based on what you paid. Like, that's pretty significant. Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, same type of thing. Boise, Idaho, same type of thing. Austin, Texas, probably going to be one of the worst in this particular time right now. Going to be one of the worst. But that's something we need to get out of our vocabulary, that you're throwing away money if you're renting. Just do the math. That's what this comes down to. If anyone comes up and says that to you, ask them about your particular market and say, is it cheaper to rent than to buy, or is it more expensive to rent than to buy? And let them start to do the numbers and realize that, that's just a phrase that has been carried on forever, but it doesn't even mean that it's true. It all comes down to where you live. Well, I hope that was beneficial to you guys. I'm sure it will be, because it's just simple mathematics, right? So get out in your area, start looking for homes, compare that to the rent and the full mortgage, what you would pay. Start doing some research. And even if you're watching this 5 years from now in 2027, it's still going to be the same math. That's the great part about it. I'll be making some more videos on these types of topics, just things that we go through in life, whether it's picking a school, what to do with credit cards. And one of my favorites that I love is all debt bad? Now, I disagree with Dave Ramsey because I also look at things from the investor's perspective. So there is a benefit to debt. I will make a video on that, but I'm talking about debt that brings income from real estate. It's a bit different, or from a business. It's not your personal debt where you're spending money on a credit card or something like that. But all of these things are important and beneficial depending on what you want to do in your life. So I'll catch you on the next video.